Okay, so let's delve into the interview question. It was about 2 months ago when I had an interview for a new school, so this is as up to date as it comes.
The first question, Alec, I'm going to ask is, why would you like to teach at home, and why have you applied for this post?
Make sure that you've done a bit of research. Go on their website, find out what their values are, what their ethos is, and then try to figure out, well, how can I fit into that, and put that into the reasons why you want to work for the school. Now, you're not going to have all the information because obviously you're going off of a website or their inspection reports, but as much as you can draw on that really shows that you're interested in that particular school. For example, I want to contribute towards a positive community that really encourages change and challenges the students to progress to the next level. I think it's really important that they take risks in learning so they can actually understand how to problem solve. The next question that they might ask you is, what is your teaching philosophy? And again, this kind of draws back to that first question. So make sure you do know their ethos so that you can draw into that as well. So as a new teacher, they're going to ask you,
and why did you decide to go into teaching following the degree?
Now this is completely personal. It could be that your own school experience was really positive or maybe not so positive and you want to make a difference. Or maybe you just really love teaching children and making an impact. I have a combination of both. Again, this is personal. Why are you getting into teaching? So another question they might ask you is, what is your teaching style? They're trying to kind of form a picture of what you look like in the classroom. No doubt there's probably going to be a teaching part of your interview where you have to go and teach a class, but for now they're trying to kind of paint a picture of what you might look like. Is it more teacher-led or is it student-led with a lot of discussions where they kind of guide the learning? Do you use a lot of whiteboards? Is there lots of technology? I'll get to that. How do you teach? So for example, I love my teaching to be varied. Some is teacher-led if there's a lot of information involved, but then it is mainly student-led so that they can kind of steer their learning. I like to do a lot of questioning because this helps me to measure the progress of that student, and really helps me to see whether they're understanding that content. So what do you bring to the table over another candidate, right? A lot of the time there's lots of candidates going for the same job, so you need to stand out. This is your opportunity to shine. What will you bring that another candidate might not? So you could say things like, one of my strengths is leadership or behavior management. I'm really good at organization or being innovative and creative with my ideas. So any of those things would suffice. Ultimately, I tend to focus on being passionate and the drive and really just helping them in the foundations of what will set them forward for life. So another question that's likely to come up in your interview is to do with behavior management or what your classroom management plan might look like. So I tend to focus on positive reinforcement. I mean, there's lots of YouTube videos out there and blogs and lots of stuff about how to manage behavior, and I found that there's not really one way to manage behavior because it ultimately comes down to you knowing those students, which you would obviously do at the beginning of the year. But that's not to say that you're not going to have behavior that pops up here and there. So I find that using a role model, positively reinforcing good behavior rather than focusing on the negative behavior and singling them out. I think it's really important to have clear expectations at the start of term and to outline those so that all parties involved understand that, whether that be the teacher, the student or the parent. Really important that everybody understands what the expectations are. So interaction with parents is really big in the school environment because of course they're learning in school, but it's important that they actually take that home and use that learning in the real world. So how do you interact with parents or carers? So you could say things like, it's really important to know the background of that child and to establish that quite early on in the term. I would also get parents involved when it comes to home learning. Maybe it's a note that they're putting on their child's homework of how they've reflected on that work. Or maybe I've set some work to do some cooking and they could taste that and let me know how they thought that went. This is encouraging the child to do well, but also involving the parent in the learning process as well. You could also use praise calls. Once a week, pick a couple of students and call their parents and give them a praise call, something that they've done really well on. That really boosts the morale of the child, helps them to grow in confidence, and also keeps the parent involved. You could do this on platforms such as class charts, which is a little bit easier as a whole class initiative. You can put positives and negatives on there, and the parent can pretty much see that on an app on their phone. But again, that's down to your school, whether they have that system. So one of the roles you will have as a teacher is being a form tutor, the first person that they're likely to see in the morning. And this is going to be the first person that they see in the entire term when they're new students. So it's really important that you get to know your students, right? And you'll find that naturally some will be more outspoken and some will be a little bit more reluctant and slow to speak out. So they're going to need a little bit of encouragement to kind of feel comfortable with this new person and this new surroundings. So you could do things such as icebreakers, maybe an about me where you get to learn what they like, what their hobbies are, when their birthdays are. Or you might do an activity where it forces kind of everybody to be involved, which again will help them to grow in confidence. So another question that you might get is, how do you motivate students? So it could look like this. I would motivate students by having one-to-one dialogue. I think it's really important to come out of the classroom setting and kind of just talk to them and make sure they understand the work and that they're making good progress in their own eyes as well. I really want to create a safe and approachable environment. So just motivating them to do well with things of praise and also giving them a chance to speak. Now, I've been on a few interviews and every single time there's been this question. Name one difficult moment that you've been through and how did you handle it? So this is an opportunity for you to really show how you've managed your weaknesses, not to capitalize on them so much, but how you've turned it around and made it for the good. So it could look like this. After reflecting, I didn't really manage my time very well. I put a lot in my lesson plan and I didn't manage to get through all of it, which meant that the learning objectives were not met. So what I did after reflecting on this is I restructured the next lesson, the following lesson, to make sure that all information was fully understood and those learning objectives were met. Again, think about your own personal experiences here. Think about what you've done in your training. Is there anything that stands out where you turned a situation around? So progress and assessment is really, really key, because ultimately this is allowing you to assess where exactly the child is and how much progress they've made. So this could be in the form of formative assessment or summative assessment. And formative assessment is basically little quizzes and little tests which basically give you an indication of where they're up to as they go through a topic. Whereas summative assessment is more of an end of topic test. For example, you might have an end of topic exam, right? Or like a little mock exam, which kind of assesses where they're up to in that particular topic. But ultimately, there is constant assessment going on whilst you're monitoring, once you're questioning in your lesson. I like to do a benchmark test or a baseline assessment at the beginning of the term, which basically tells me where exactly they're at. First thing we do in our first lesson, and then we pretty much move from there. I cannot stress enough, focus on your learning objectives. They need to meet them, and you need to know your learning outcomes as well. So another question you might get is, what is your strength? Again, another really great opportunity for you to shine and kind of do a little bit of brag about yourself. I mean, I don't feel comfortable most of the time saying strengths because I just feel like it sounds a bit cocky, but this is your chance, so do use it. It could be that you're really good at differentiating, whether it's high ability children, low ability, those with special needs. It could be really good behaviour management. It could be that you can use technology really well. I'll get to that. It could be anything. Again, this is personal. What are you good at? Just be sure to back these up with examples. It's really good to say, oh yeah, I'm great at behaviour management, but when they ask you, okay, give us an example, and you're like, it's not going to look great. The most recent question that I've been having is, how do you use technology in the classroom? Technology is really big, everything's innovating, and children are very receptive to it. So how are you going to use it in your classroom? And I would say something like, I use Smartboard for a lot of activities, and I also use Google Classroom because it means that the child can be interactive with me. I also like to use quizzes, which allows the child to use an iPad or a phone to answer the questions to the quiz that's up on the board. They really love that one. You get the idea.
Do you have any questions you'd like to ask us about the post?
Always have a question to ask. It just shows how serious you are about this job. So I'm going to give you 3 key tips that I feel like every new teacher needs to know before they go to their interview. So the first one is to have your student portfolio or your trainee teacher portfolio, which is basically documenting everything that you have done, every piece of feedback that you've had, and really makes you stand out from other candidates that might be going for the job as well. I now have a subject audit, which basically just outlines what I consider to be my strengths or what I am working on at the moment, which to the employer kind of shows that, you know, you're still reflecting in your practice and you know that, you know, there's things to work on. Children are learning, but so are we. So the second tip I think you need to know is dress the part. Many times I've been to interviews and people are just in jeans and trainers. Now I'm not saying you have to go in a blazer, but you do need to look smart because it ultimately says that you're taking that job seriously. And the third tip that I would give is don't downplay your position. Yes, you're a first year teacher and there might be other people that are more experienced in the field, but try to focus on what you do know and really capitalize on the things that you have shown strength in. Now the reality is a lot of schools actually want newly qualified teachers because ultimately you are cheaper than people that might have been in the profession for 10-20 years, for example. So there's always got that, you've always got that in your corner. If you have any questions, by all means pop it down in the comments and I respond to every single comment or question that you ask. Alright guys, see you in the next one. Bye.